All right, everyone. We'll just wait for everyone to sort of get on. Everyone's a bit slow with the movement, but look, let me just change this quickly. I realised when I said I did all my checks that I did forget one thing that's pretty important. So I'll just bring that up here, so it's on the top screen, so I can see it. There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. Jimmy here, my online guy. Firstly. Shouldn't be drinking that, but look, it's Friday. No beer. I'm on a keto diet. For those that are interested, I've lost about 6 kilos in 3 weeks. So yeah, well on the way to getting under 110, and then the next stop there is 100 kilos. So anyway, that's not why we're here today. So today's Frothy Friday. First, it's been a while, so it's good to be back. It's good to be back talking, and I've got a hell of a guest on today. So guys, we all know that some of the best ideas that we all come up with in our business are done on the back of over a couple of beers with mates and on the back of a napkin. Funnily enough, this is actually how Frothy Friday came about. A couple of mates were sitting down and they're like, "Oh, you should get people on and have a chat to them." So exactly the same concept. We drew it, and that's where we ended up. But this back of the envelope thinking and visualizing concepts to solve problems is actually a really effective way of to strategize for your business. And it actually has a name. It's called visual thinking, and it's actually a very well documented and proven concept. So as this is the topic, as this is personally a topic I want to really broach and really dive deep into it, we went for a search. Danny went on the search and to find someone that can enlighten us on the topic. And today, we're lucky to have Chris Dawson from Visual Thinking. Chris is the principal trainer for Australia of the back of the envelope concept, which is based around Dan Rome's best-selling books. You can see behind Chris there, it's a well-used version of one of them, but it's arguably the gold standard when it comes to visual thinking. And Chris is also a veteran entrepreneur and a managing director of a manufacturing company, which now turns over 25x the original purchase price. So it's a big growth there. So Chris, tell us more about yourself, about visual thinking, and what was the most complex concept you've had to visualize so far?
Sure. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for the intro there. Look, I'm a little bit about myself, my background. I was your stereotypical kid that was terrible at school. Spent more time outside of the classroom than inside of the classroom. Yet that I was fairly, after school, fairly interested in trying to pursue my own interests. Terrible at the corporate life and all that sort of stuff. So becoming an entrepreneur fairly early, even though I don't like the Americanization or whatever of that term entrepreneur. I think it's a bit wanky, to be honest, but effectively that's what it is. Where you're taking a risk, believing in yourself, betting on yourself, and going into business for yourself in some capacity. So about 15 years ago, I'd had a consultancy at the time. I was doing marketing, web development, business development, and I came across the world of visual thinking in the form of what was called at the time the business model canvas. It's fairly popular. A lot of universities are now integrating the canvas into their mainstream MBA. It's reinventing business studies, because what it does very quickly, and what visuals do extremely quickly, is they help paint a picture about what it is you're talking about, but also equally, if not more importantly, what you're not talking about. To create a conversation around some diagrams, some lines on the back of a napkin, on a piece of paper, just rudimentary in one-on-one in a group over a few beers at the pub, and that might then transcend into a conversation that happens on a whiteboard, and then that might move further to a document or whatever. So there's lots of layers, and I would like to go over a few of those. But for me personally, it helps on a daily basis, whether I'm just note-taking for myself in a way that creates a channel of thinking about things differently, because what we're trying to do is use the rest of our brain. A school teaches us about linear learning, A, B, C, D, process, and that's important, but there's so much else we're missing out on that visual thinking can help us achieve. By drawing things, the brain can then start to think about things differently. The brain will see things in pictures. So by mapping that picture out, it might be a doodle, it might be a mind map, or it might be more sophisticated as you get better. And there's no one size fits all as well. It's not like what this framework that looking forward to sort of exploring a bit with you guys now. That's a framework, but it's a kaleidoscope of stuff. I've come across stuff that I just didn't resonate with me. And then there's other stuff that was just couldn't get enough of. But most importantly, if I can use that to help myself think about things and have a conversation with my team, have a conversation with clients, then there's more of a chance that we're going to be on the same page. One of the terms that we like to use a lot is eliminate the blah, blah, blah. There's so much business talk that, particularly when you're dealing with an expert in, an IT expert or an engineer or a plumber or a finance person. There's a lot of different industry conversations, a lot of different jargons, a lot of different context to what's getting spoken about. Visuals, as you start getting into it, help you go, well, drawing on a piece of paper, really simply, is this what we're talking about? Is this what we're talking about? And regardless of your background, your culture, or your academia or trade background, it just cuts through the crap, and that's what I love about it.
It's crazy you say that too. It's so true. Like, there's people looking at cave art and stuff from from the caveman times, and it's like, okay, well, this guy's holding a spear pointing it to an antelope. I assume that he's hunting him. You don't have to have spoken their language. You don't have to have known anything about the context. It's like that picture literally speaks 1,000 words, and that's you're right. I think everyone's brains are wired that way, where you respond better to a picture than just a wall of text. It's why infographics work so well on blog posts and things like that from a marketing perspective. Anyway.
Yeah, look, we've gone from full circle from Egyptian hieroglyphics 4,000 years ago, and now we're emojis on our phone. It's gone through this whole circle, and I think it was 2007 or thereabouts. Macquarie Dictionary word of the year was actually the smiley face. So
really?
it goes to show how universal it is.
Yeah, in like 4,000 years, when we've all blown ourselves up and whatever, and the aliens land, like, what is this? What is this eggplant? What does that mean? It's like,
what's this peach?
What's the peach? Exactly. So obviously, our audience is a pretty blue collar, everyday sort of business audience. Why should they care? They're spending millions of plates. We say this every week, but why should they care about visual thinking?
Because it's going to save a lot of headaches, and it's going to make them more money. And because all day, every day, what we do is communicate. We're communicating to ourselves, but in business, we're communicating to either the client or our tradies or our apprentices. It's all about project management. Is 101 communication skills. And what we can do here, we're going to touch on a few really simple things. And I'd like to really stress the biggest hurdle to this. People say, "Oh, but I can't draw." We are not talking about drawing. We're talking about if you've got the skill capacity to draw a line, a triangle, a square, a circle, a blob. If you got a PhD, if you can do a stick man, right? It's so simple. And if I'll give you a little story that just recently. I was up on my partner's farm, and the father-in-law was running a renovation project, multiple tradies, nothing written down at all, which is not uncommon. But not only did the project blow out 2x and the time blow out almost that as well, his stress was through the roof. Towards the end, I had to step in and start project managing a few of the tradies because what was hitting the fan. And with just some simple basic, we're not talking about a full, term of contracts that should have been written, just some simple basic line diagrams, which I'm happy to jump in and show you some stuff now. How to project manage, A, B, C, D. So everybody in the room with a pen and a piece of paper, the tradesperson and the client could have saved so many headaches, because what's the worst thing a project manager and a client wants to avoid? Everyone avoids in business. You want to avoid surprises. Surprises cost money. So the better you can just document some simple stuff some pictures that just tie it all together, the better everybody can get on with their job, save money, and get a better outcome.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to throw this this up, see if this. Oh, that. So just for context, I sat down half an hour before and went, how are we going to get this screencast screen to pop up? And it took us about 20 minutes, but we got there. So I don't know, it probably doesn't mean much to you guys, but this is a technological feat that we've achieved here. So yeah, this is I'll hand it over to Chris, but yeah, this is a bit of a background about the back of the napkin, which, like I mentioned, is a really good book. You know, if you guys get a chance, go and find it, because it's yeah, it does. You find it so much easier to communicate when you're talking about pictures and images. So yeah, lead away, Chris.
Sure. So what we're effectively talking about is whoever draws the best picture wins. And again, we're not talking about an artistic process. We're talking about a thinking process. And so when you start tackling problems, and this is a macro level, so this is on the bigger picture stuff. When you've got a very complicated problem and you're trying to work through it, might be a complicated work site, it might be a complicated mechanical issue, electrical issue, it might be a branding issue, it could be a whole heap of things that you face as a business owner. There are multiple things, multiple moving parts. It's really hard. We become like a deer in the headlights when we face a problem that overwhelms us. I don't know about you, but I personally many times suffered from the ostrich syndrome, where things just got too much, and I just wanted a beer, and I just wanted to go home, and I just wanted to forget about the business because I couldn't think about the problem. What we start to learn as we move in from novice to intermediate with these skills is how to navigate around these problems. What's up, what's down, like what do we tackle first? How do we communicate? How do we delegate? How do we execute? Now, I mentioned before, we're not talking about an artistic process, and I'm going to repeat myself a few times because it's a really, really important one. If you can draw a dot, a line, an arrow, square, triangle, circle, blob, or God forbid, the stick man, and if you've got skills on this capacity, you are a winner. So, but this is what we call the visual alphabet, and what you'll find with businesses, for example, visual thinking comes loosely under the umbrella of what they call design thinking, which has been thrown around a lot. Design thinking is a fancy way of saying, how can we think about differently? How can we go through the non-traditional, problem resolution? How can we use lateral thinking outside the box? That's all design thinking. Visual thinking starts with your visual alphabet, and this is the visual alphabet. From this, we can start we can start conversations around objects. We can start conversations around people. We can start conversations around charts, maps, timelines, and flowcharts. And right there, you've got the beginning of how to dissect a problem. And in all strategy, it's about how do you distill an idea, and then how do you expand on that idea? How do you distill an idea, trim the fat, get rid of all the non-essential bullshit that might come with a business idea or discussing a problem? What is the core of the problem? How quickly can we create a conversation and defining that problem? And once we've done that, how can we expand on that? So what I'd like to get into now is there is a lot of graphic facilitation. There's a lot of drawing classes and stuff like out there. Where this differs is because we're not an artistic process in this particular framework, we're a thinking process. It's because you're understanding how the brain wants to dissect a problem. The first thing the brain wants to know is who or what that are we talking about. Who or what am I looking at? Like, think of a caveman staring across the plain in Africa. He wants to know who or what I'm looking at. Once he understands, okay, there's some kill or in a modern context, it's a business problem. Even right now, who or what is Chris talking about? What is this visual thinking? Once you understand the who or the what, that's the first part. So that's the first way the brain wants to understand something. It then moves to how much. We want to quantify that, right? We want to know how much of an opportunity, how much, the caveman.
Is it a rabbit or a gazelle? You know, is it worth
Is
chasing up?
is there 10 of them? Is there 1,000 of them? Am I going to be able to catch them? Are they a mile away or are they 100 miles away? How hungry am I? Like, how much do I want that? You know, and in the business context, usually what's the risk versus what's the reward? How much money have I got to spend to set this business up, employ apprentices? How much, what is the value of that job versus the risk of that job, which could be travel time, which could be expenses, which could be insurances. Once we've established that, we move to the next sequence, which is where does this fit into my world? Again, back to the caveman. Where does this fit into my needs to make the effort to go after that wildebeest? We're really hungry and we're starving, so we really need that. So the where is very important. As far as on a tangible level, back to the tradie on a day-to-day basis, where does this fit into my business needs? Is this the kind of job that I want to take on? Is this the kind of apprenticeship? Does this apprentice have the same values as my business, as me? Where does this fit in my day-to-day and how much I want to tackle that? And then it's, of course, when do we need to execute? So those 4 elements there are the 4 building blocks, and that's just to start the conversation, but it's a really great place to start, because once you understand the who and the what, we want to draw a portrait or an object. So it's either a person or it's a concept. So the who or the what might be the client. The who or the what might be the apprentice. The who or the what could be the new power tools or whatever it is we're bringing on board for the next year. Then how much? How much are these power tools? How much is apprentice going to add value to the business? How much are we going to have to invest in training this apprentice? How much is the risk of this job coming up? And that's usually represented by a chart, because charts are the best typically when you're talking about quantifying something. Again, the where is a map. The map might be a Venn diagram, things overlapping just to explain stuff, to either just jot down in your own ideas or explaining to your investor, your client, or your staff. And again, of course, then timelines. We've got
sorry to interrupt. So just with where,
Sure.
So that would be like if you were like, so if this was the apprentice philosophy, so the where would be like where they would sit relative to the other employee, like yourself and stuff. Is that what where would be?
Yeah, look, that's the where starts moving into some absolutely. It's a bit fluid, but yes, it could be. Doesn't have to be one where. There could be a couple of wheres. Like, where does this fit with the business plan? Where does this fit with our financial capacity today versus our financial capacity hopefully next year? Like, where does this fit in with our long-term branching? Where does this fit in with who the risk and the work I want to do? My one-man handyman that is happy to do that, or am I wanting to scale up? Like, where does this problem or opportunity fit in what I'm trying to plan here? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Wonderful. And then, we've got the timeline. So that's basically all we've done there is use these elements, which are made up of these elements, to be able to start thinking a bit more strategically and map things out. So that's your one tool in a kit of many tools. So, we then move into a whole heap of different, what we call the Swiss Army knife. So that's our who, what, how much, where, when. So that's one of our tools. We've got a whole heap of other things that I'm not going to bombard you with today, but effectively what they do is when we've got a problem that overwhelms us, instead of being a deer in the headlights, we're able to start dissecting things and looking just piece by piece, take that piece out and have a look at what's going on in that particular element, whether it's on our own, whether it's in a group of people. We can start, like I said before, we can distill that idea down to its basic element before being able to expand on it again.
Because that's definitely something. Look, I face it. That's probably the biggest thing I find with having an agency, especially, and as you would have experienced, it's like because everything's possible. from a marketing perspective, just about everything's possible, right? So there's no, you kind of want to have like a way of going, okay, well, because everything's possible doesn't mean you have to do everything. It's like what at its core is important. But then if you need some way of breaking down those, like what the goal is, distilling it back down to something that makes sense. And I've tried to do that with all different kinds of things, project management tools and stuff. But it never, I get it done, and then I look at it and go, well, it actually doesn't make any sense to me anymore. And this looks like a good way to stop that.
Yeah, there are a lot of tools out there, just like any tradesman's, it's the right tool for the right job. And that's the first step of understanding, well, yes, we've got, from sketch notes to icons, where you start on a basic level, squares, shapes, doodles, timelines, relationships. That's just all stuff that can help you to segment your thoughts and get things down. Even if it's a list, like start with a list, but then with that list, break that into relationships. You said you're a big fan of mind maps. Mind maps are fantastic. How do we then move that mind map into something that not only shows relationships, but might also be able to have a story? If you can create a picture that you can talk through with yourself and then possibly with your client or your team or a business investor, you want to sell your business at some point possibly, well, you better tell a pretty good story, not just on your profit and loss statement, but how the next person can take what you do, replicate that, and scale that.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's it's so funny because even today, something that I've been working on, because like I'm lucky I've got a very good team that thinks for themselves, and it's freed me up to do a little bit more about personal branding. And I literally did a mind map about that today. And like I said, I looked at it and went, okay, I've done this. It still doesn't help me execute on it. It's like I've just like taken what I had in my mind and put it on paper. But it's like, okay, where do I go from here, sort of thing. And that's this looks like this is a great way to fill that. Because look, every business owner is the same. 2:00 in the morning, it's like, oh, we should do this. You jot it down somewhere, and then you end up with a book of notes. It's like, oh, we should do this. We should do this. But there's actually no plan to help articulate and execute on it.
Absolutely. And the other thing that was, I think, is really important to understand is the mind is great at thinking of ideas, but it's terrible at retaining and remembering those ideas. And so if you can learn some tools that best suit you and possibly your client and your business as well, and it helps you communicate that and think about things. And so when you do have that mind map, it's not, and I've done so many mind maps. So I look back through my books, I was like, that was actually really good, but I didn't do anything with it. And so being able to then extract that information in a way that helps you think about it, communicate it, tell a story about it, talk about it with your partner, your team, your clients, you're only going to have a lot less resistance to getting things done. You're going to be able to get things done faster. You're going to save on training costs. You're going to get more clients because they see what you're trying to. They see the vision, not just in the vision of the end result of the project, but the vision of the way you work, the way you operate, and the way you make decisions. If you can communicate that vision on your website, if you can communicate that vision on your quotes, and if you can communicate that vision in your project management, that's just, like one of my favorite sayings is, explain it to me like I'm a 4-year-old. I'm not that smart. So I need these tools to help me when I'm in a board meeting with finance people and engineers. I need to map this out because is this what you're talking about? And I need to draw that out so that when I leave that room, I know that we're on the same page.
Yeah, well, IT, especially like developers, are notoriously bad at understanding what I would argue is like layman stuff, and vice versa. They'll explain concepts to me. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. It sounds really fancy, but what is it? I've got to be able to explain this to the guy we're working with, and he's not going to know what that is. So like, yeah, pictures are a good way to cross that into language bridge, for that kind of thing.
100%. Look, I've had it so many times. I'm sure everybody's experienced where whatever business you're in, whether you're a fridgie or a builder or a finance person, you are somewhat a subject matter expert in your field, and more likely than not, you're probably dealing with non-subject matter experts, or not what I call non-subject matter expert. Sorry, decision makers. So the decision makers aren't the subject matter expert; they're the client, where they've engaged you to come to the house or the site, and they don't know what you know. They don't know the regulations. They don't understand that, to put a crossbeam in there, you've got to pull all that out, and that requires that, and structural support, and OH&S, and you've got to shut that down, and there's a bigger picture here. They can't see what you see. So some very simple visuals, and just like what I've put up here, that can, you're starting to, if you got, if we could just focus on these four here, where you've got lists, you've got steps, you've got timelines, and then you've got a roadmap. These four here are just the entry level of being able to explain a project, for example, that will save so many headaches in the long run. If you can sit down with a client in 5 minutes and just go through, you probably already got your list in your head, you've got your steps in your head, but then you've got to work with the client on their timeline to be able to show ultimately the roadmap for completion. I tell you what, that's 1,000 times better than a page of words. You've just got some simple documented words, pictures that will clarify a whole heap of stuff.
So do you have a couple of examples? Like, do you have an example of what one of these would look like?
Sure do. Glad you asked.
A good segue, wasn't it? But no, I'm curious because like I have an idea of what it would look like in my head, but obviously, there's a lot of people that are watching that may not be as familiar with seeing the bigger picture of how it actually comes to fruition. So yeah, if you've got something there, it'd be really cool.
Look, a really simple one is obviously the timeline, and the beauty, you can practice this stuff beforehand, and you can even have your paper ready, your notepad ready with some stuff before you get to the client. So even if you're completely beginner, you can just copy some stuff down and write around that. But a project timeline might consist of several steps and contingencies before the next step can get completed and started on. So here's a really rudimentary, really rough drawing. This is obviously A, B, C, D, and explaining to the client before step A can be completed, before we can move to the next step, these things need to be completed. Otherwise, we can't move here. If these are not completed on time, Mr. Client, then I need to come back, and of course, there's going to be an additional charge. Sorry, that's gone a bit low, hasn't it?
Okay.
And then there might be, parallel to that, there might be some other steps that could be done, which could be organising regulations, organising OH&S stuff. That can happen parallel, but they are a sub-step. So all of a sudden, you're talking about a whole heap of steps that fall within this particular channel. They might be able to happen parallel, but this top step is the primary project, and that's maybe what all the client is thinking about, and that's the surface level, the stuff that the client thinks they're going to pay for. What they might not realise is that before we can move to step B, these need to be completed on time. Otherwise, we're not going anywhere. We need to stop the job, and there's going to be some financial contingencies tied to that. So what I've done there is very rough, but this is all you need to do to start to have conversations around a project that's time orientated or dependency orientated. Does that make sense? Any questions around that?
So like where the visualizations come in is like, so I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, I've gone to see a client and we're talking about, let's say, SEO, and I'm like, okay, well, with SEO, these are the phases, and like really this is like the end result, and there might be a picture of a dollar sign or something. But at the, to get started, the website, the way it is, we're going to have to do something about it. And yeah, and then you can leave that with them. And like immediately when I look at this, I actually recall what you spoke about when I'm looking at these pictures. So like I suppose you could leave them with this, with the picture you made, and then it will like trigger them to think about the things you actually spoke about when you drew it.
Absolutely. Now, don't think, oh, it's too messy, I don't want to leave that with a client. This is just what you're doing now. Mind you, I'm 1,000 times messier on the touch screen than I am with a pen. I prefer my weapon of choice is a piece of paper and a pen. And to start a conversation with a blank piece of paper and a pen in front of a client where you're talking through that, their eyes are following as you're talking, and they are engaged. They're 100% engaged because they're watching. It's like a dog with a ball. When something's moving, people's eyes are just drawn to it. When there's a process, and when it's happening live in front of them, you just look like you know what you're talking about. Obviously, you've got to know what you're talking about it, but you've got to partner that with visuals that help your audience understand what's going on. But even if it is as rough as this, I can then take that home, I can polish it up, and the next day I can send them something beautiful that is exactly what we spoke about the day before. There's no surprises, which we all hate in business. And the client has the confidence because you've actually taken them through the journey of the process in front of them, and you haven't spoken to them like they're just an idiot, which a lot of clients feel like, particularly in the building game. So don't get scared by thinking I have to be a great drawer. I'm going to say it for the fourth time. This is not an artistic process. This is a thinking process.
Yes. And so what do you, so let's say, I've gone and laid out some ideas and concepts like this. It's like time. Where do you store all this stuff? What do you do with it once you've created it? What do you generally do with your, visual thinking sort of processes?
Yeah, look, I'm a big fan of Evernote, sorry, is just be able to collate mess because I'm on the go and I want to just quickly jot down ideas. I always keep a pad and piece of pen handy, just blank sheets, just something to doodle on. But I'll show you another project that we ran recently in my business. This was us going through our lean engineering, and as you can see, there's no actual drawing going on, but this is, some people might call it a design sprint, or there's a whole heap of different names for it. Some might just call it common sense. And tell you what, a lot of lean or efficiency type processes are effectively what I call advanced common sense. You're just breaking things down to, what do we need to talk about? What's the problem? And if the 5 whys, how do you get to the heart of the problem? So this was a project when we were running through a particular element. We manufacture some 30 different products, and they can have some 6 different variations. So a combination is over 100 variations of manufacturing that might go on. This was a 2-hour job that we broke down into its core components. But what we're able to do here is to break things down into their different sections. We had strategies, we had stages, we had steps, we had the issues, and then we had ideas. We put our times for each step. We videotaped. We videotaped this particular process, which was plumbing of a spa bath, and we had those times put down. But what this allowed us to do was really start to see where the waste was in a way that nobody had ever been able to have a conversation. This is a way of visual thinking, because we're getting all the individual components up on the board in a way. And there's 6 of us sat around, and my most senior guy, who's 70 years of age, who's been fiberglassing and sparring for 40, 50 years, who said, quote unquote, you can't improve the process any more than I've done. And that's this allowed us to have a non-biased conversation, because before we did this, it was a lot of assumptions. There was a lot of irritation because I believed we could improve here and here, but we couldn't. It was all subjective. What this does this process did was made it really objective. We knew where the time was. We knew what the dependencies were. We knew it, with the video that we took of the 2 hours, just that one job, it gave us so much information to be able to plaster this on the board and have a conversation. And even the old boy that's been there forever, been doing it forever, he sat back and went, wow, I didn't think we'd be able to have a conversation around how, he was blown away, and he was the biggest challenge because, quote unquote, he knew it all. But we're the expert. That's what I always say.
Yeah, and so okay, so you sit down and you go, okay, well, team, we can do this better. Let's have effectively, it's like a brain dump for different stages. It's like, let's all do this, because I went to a startup weekend once and we did something very similar for an idea. And,
was it called a design sprint?
Well, that's what it was the designer that made us do it, because I was like the marketing guy. But what we found is, like, it took a little bit to get the ball rolling on the first couple of items. But once the first couple of items got there, it was like just a regurgitation, and everyone was like, because that was like, okay, well, we framed what we're actually supposed to talk about, and they're like coming up with ideas that no one had thought about, and it was rolling around in the back of their head. And I suppose that's what happened here. So what happens from this point? So you've gone and laid out where the inefficiencies are, and then how do you action something like this?
Well, after that, we then we all were given a certain number of votes in the room, and we voted priority ones, priority twos. We listed those priority ones and priority twos, and we came up with a list of actions for this week, and slowly executing those. But then from that, I'm able to then translate that back into some of this language that I was talking about before of tasks, checklists. Big fan of checklists, but putting those into the process documentation, putting the information into the documentation, the documents that we created from this, we knew that we'd had a 360 approach. We'd written documents that were what we thought the process was, but being able to dissect the process that was 2 hours on the floor, and then we sat down for another hour or so with the team, and we actually knew that we were confident, we had evidence, we had collectively prioritized it, and then we started putting that into the documentation of our process improvement.
Awesome. And okay, so go and do that, and then you just sort of rinse and repeat, work those priorities, and then just work through your priorities.
Yeah, look, again, it's a long journey. There's a lot involved in visual thinking, and just I don't want to. There's so many strategies and different infographics and all that sort of stuff that you can get into down the track. But just to get into it, if you can just start drawing around your lists, your agendas, your timelines, you can start mapping that down and just getting comfortable with the basics. At least then you can start having those conversations with your team, with clients. Keep it really simple. And there's a world of different frameworks and strategies in the world of visual thinking, design thinking. But if you can just start getting pen to paper around those basics, everyone does a lot of lists. How can you segment those lists? How can you then block out those lists in certain priorities? And then following up, how can you use your visual representations, whether it be numbering, and just circling back, closing the loop on the end of your day, with those mind maps, agendas, whatever it is you're working on.
All right. So obviously, you do a lot of consulting and a lot of training in this area. What are some of the hesitations or objections you face when you talk to businesses specifically about visual thinking, and how do you normally respond to those objections?
Yeah, the biggest issue is that people just want you to solve the problem for them. I think as humans, we like to get the fastest possible result, and so I'm quite often asked to come into businesses where they don't just want the training, they actually just want the answer, and which is where you start moving into consulting. So trying to educate the client while working with them on a problem that's actually going to lower their risk or be a return on investment as far as their thinking, whether it be brand positioning, whether it be their business plan for the year, whether it be an exit strategy, how to implement these tools. So you're teaching without trying to consult. There's a very fine line. So that's a hard point. And the second thing is everyone's saying, oh, it's too hard. I'm not a drawer. I can't draw. And I keep coming back. We're not talking about drawing. Again, if you can do that stuff, if you can do the dot, the line, the arrow, the square, the triangle, the circle, the blob, and the beloved stick man, then you've got all the skills in the world to be able to be an effective visual thinker.
You know, and I'd imagine that if you went to a tradie or plumber and said, look, I'll give you $1,000 to draw a stick man and draw a picture of a house, a stick man and a spanner in his hand, I'm sure they could whip up a drawing pretty quickly if it was, if it meant they were going to get a tangible return. And I suppose it's like any training. It's like if you invest in yourself and you invest in what you can do, then you equip yourself with tools to get a return on that money. And it's a common thread amongst people that I get on is like when I ask them the biggest objection, it's like, they just want you to fix the problem, not actually, like distill what's actually the root cause. So that's I'd imagine that's the bane of anyone that does train more obscure concepts and things like that. I'm sure if you were teaching tradies about something that they really, really, really were passionate about, or like if you were a guy teaching people how to fish, or catch a, snapper or something like that, you'd have lines out the door. But, sometimes, the stuff that gets you the best return in business is sometimes the stuff that your competitor's not doing either. So if you're doing this and your competitors aren't, they've got an efficiency that you don't. That means you can charge, you get a better margin on your work, more efficient.
Absolutely. If you can paint the better picture, if your client can see the end result, they can see the way you go about your business. They can see what your business stands for a bit quicker, with a bit more clarity. Well, that's only going to do you good in the long run, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think too, like, I'm pretty good, and there's a lot of people out there, salespeople, that are really good at verbally describing a picture and telling a picture, and that's all really sales is instead of doing it visually on paper, you verbally, a lot of times you verbally paint that picture in their head and that scenario in their head. But not everyone's good at doing that. It's the same as doing this, it's a learnt skill. So like if you're not the greatest communicator in the world and you're losing business to your competitors that have, that are charismatic or whatever, gregarious, whatever is their advantage, well, this can be your advantage. If you can like lay it out so that when the client's looking at getting a plumbing job done or like, a renovation done, and they're looking at you where you've explained, the types of things you're gonna do and the timelines on paper, just drawn it out, so that the husband can go to the wife and go, does this make sense? This is what they want to do. Or, then you got a guy that explained it to the wife and has to explain it to the husband now, and something gets lost in translation. It's definitely I could see it definitely being an advantage, especially if you're not really that good at telling a verbal story and creating that visual picture in someone's head.
Oh, 100%. And look, just like you go through your apprenticeship, there's, multiple stages. And so that first year apprenticeship, you're learning how to pick up the tools and turn the power saw on and the safety and whatnot. And that's kind of what I've wanted to emphasize today, that there are, just by getting pen to paper and starting to map out things. And look, feel free to follow up with our website. There's plenty of resources there, or Dan Rome's, or the book, or there's a plethora of other authors out there. But starting with that visual alphabet really is your apprenticeship, and then moving up to final year apprenticeship is where you start looking at strategies. Don't go to I want to get to strategies today, because that's probably not going to happen. starting at that apprenticeship level of the visual alphabet, looking at, these, don't switch back, but looking at the different elements of basic charts, basic graphs, basic mind maps, basic timelines. How can you best, and again, you can pre-do all this stuff before you get in front of the client. Don't get scared and think, I've got to be really good on the first go. Just practice a bit the night before you're going into a client. Even pre-draw a lot of the major shapes. So all you're doing is going underneath it and just filling in the lines. And so that itself is just one of the biggest hacks to this whole thing. But it is a process. And you got to find what you're comfortable with,
Yep. And so a question I always ask, pretty much all of my guests is, like, one of the big things I preach on this channel and in my YouTube channel and stuff is like processes and systems and tools to help make you more efficient. Now, what systems and processes do you have in place to keep visual thinking ticking over like a oiled machine, CRM systems, things like that?
Yeah, sure. We've got fairly sophisticated back end, with our CRM and funnels. I've got a marketing manager that looks after all that. I used to be all up to date with that stuff prior to the about 15 years ago before the manufacturing business. I still love it. I still absolutely love it. But, there's only 26 hours in a day. So I can only do so many things, but I still love having those conversations around the marketing and the online. I'm not as up to date with everything as I'd like to be, but I can only do so many things. But making sure that lead funnel goes in, and every time I'm having a conversation with my marketing manager, I want to know what she's working on, how that integrates into the next step, like what's coming out the other end. Is it rubbish in and rubbish out? Are we actually getting quality leads? And are we nurturing those leads? How are we communicating? What are the touch points of those leads? And that process is very well mapped out. And if there's something at the end of that, if we're not getting the conversion, well, we need to quickly look through that funnel and go, what's working? And do we need to zoom in on that bit? Is it method? Is the method wrong? Is the person wrong? Is the machine wrong? Materials are wrong, or Mother Nature? One of those things is going wrong in that visual. But to be able to have that mapped out and to be able to talk about that quickly, this eliminates a lot of that blah, blah, blah. And so when I've communicated with her, she can then communicate it. Barbara can then communicate it with the technical contractors. And so I know that when she's talking to them, there's going to be nothing lost in translation.
Yep. And you're all effectively singing from the same hymn book if it's visualized, because you've got that universal language that everyone understands. And
exactly.
Obviously, if you're blind, it might be a bit harder to do. But like, I think also, when you see it in pictures too, it makes it easier to explain. Like use that blind person as an example. It's like, okay, well, if your marketing manager has it visually laid out, it's a lot easier to explain as a visual relative to a visual reference than it is to just read it like text with no context. If you've got a picture of a box with a like if the picture's a jack in a box and you go, well, look, it's a box with a spring that comes out of the top and a little head, and it's got a hat on it and the guy's smiling. You go, okay, well, that's a jack in a box. It's easy to identify, and it's easy to explain like that when you can just look at something and go, I just got to explain it as it looks, and then it will give the result. And I think there's no business that I can think of that wouldn't benefit from doing that.
Yep.
Because sorry, continue. Yep.
I was just going to say, you totally hit a point that's really a real passionate conversation, particularly after a couple of beers at the pub, where I totally believe you're either a reactive or proactive business. You're either just, ticking the boxes, looking for a paycheck, and you're on autopilot, or you're proactive. And if you're proactive, you must have a strategy. You must have some forethought. And there's one thing I know for sure about strategy, and you can talk about strategy till you're blue in the face. There's a million different conversations and subject matter experts on business strategy, but strategy must be visual, because strategy, even if it's a full volume bloody document size of the old Telstra book, even if it's all, that's still talking about where we are and where we're going. So would you rather talk to your investor, or your shareholders or your team or whoever it is about, a document this thick? Would you like a 1-page visual to show outlines all that research and homework that you should have done, and you probably haven't done as much as you could, which is not uncommon. But you've got to have that. It is a strategy must be visual, and I'm passionate about that. And so how you visually articulate it, so to speak, there's a lot of options. This is just one of them. But I wholeheartedly, the only people this doesn't work with is unfortunately somebody that may be blind or vision impaired, because other than that, there's no excuse. We're all visual. The brain thinks visual. I say banana, what do you think of? You think of the visual, the image of the banana,
Yes.
And don't be a banana. Start thinking about visual thinking.
It's so true. I never actually thought about this, but like I said, I was in the Navy for a long time, like almost 10 years, and I used to work on weapon systems. So the gun on the front of the ship, the missile systems, torpedoes, things like that. We used to do, so when we did our training, you get put in front of big books, and like these books are like 60 years old, and you're just like spewing it out. But I swear, especially with the gun course, I learned almost everything I know about the gun because they had an example, like a full real life gun inside a shed. And basically we went out there. So like our teacher he was young, and he's like, okay, well, we'll read the bits in the book that we need to for the test, but let's go out to the gun and I'll show you those bits. And he'd like drag all 6 of us out to the gun, open the door and go, well, that breech block we were talking about, that's it there. This is how it operates, and move it, and goes, these are some of the things that I've seen that can go wrong with it. And then, but he would read the little cliff notes, go out to the gun, open the breech block, talk about the components that could break on it. And then we go back to the book, and he had some visual reference to go, okay, well, that's the breech block. That's the pin he's talking about, that the book's talking about. And when we go to the maintenance manuals, that's why we fix that. That's why we do plan maintenance on it. And everyone that's done a trade thinks like that. You're a mechanic. You don't just, if you see something leaking, you don't just go back to a book to read it. You look at it and go, okay, well, that goes to that pipe, that goes there. It's probably coolant. It's a good chance that this is leaking, and it's probably leaking from in there. You don't just go back to a book and go, oh, what part of the, like everyone, you may not admit it, but almost every single tradie operates visually, and then uses their written stuff as like a reference. But like it's all like how many builders out there, they just look at a structural beam and go, well, it's made of that. It's about this long. It's going to cost about this much. And then they just go to the quote to make sure that they're close to the mark. But most of them can quote something like off the top of their head just from visually seeing something. So like it's not as big a jump. It just means you have to sit in front of a piece of paper and articulate it visually. But yeah, don't be afraid as a tradie to go, actually, I should just do everything visually because I do 90% of my job that way anyway.
Yeah. Now you look around a really well organized workshop, you look at the visuals, like safety systems, they're visual, you look at a lean trade, somebody that's interested in process improvement, there's visuals everywhere because
shadow boards for tools.
Absolutely. Perfect example, shadow board for a tool, but one thing I do stress, it's not about only visuals. The golden formula is the right visuals with the right words. And then the key is to the appetite of the audience. So if I'm talking to you about a subject that you're an expert in, I better make sure the visuals are on par with your level of subject matter. If I show you bloody stick figures and you're an expert in web design and development and digital, you're going to tune off because you're going to be irritated. But I need to up the ante on those visuals if I'm talking to you about something But the other side of thing, I'm an expert and I'm talking to somebody that's not, then I better and I show them a complicated picture, an engineering diagram. That's overkill. I'm talking to a customer. I need to bring the complexity down so the customer gets it. So the right words with the right pictures to the appetite of the audience is the key. Yeah,
100%. It's why walkarounds work so well in car yards. Like when you walk someone around a car, So like when I used to work in agriculture, we used to do it with tractors. You'd start at one tire, work around the tires, and then go into the cab at the end. And the reason you did that is because you give a farmer a brochure on the machine, and they're like, okay, it means nothing. But when you go to the machine and go, well, you pop the hood and there's a 12.9 liter engine in it, and you go, that's the engine, it's big. You want to pull heavy things. This is the engine that's going to do it. It gives them a visual reference because they're standing next to them going, wow, it is a big engine. You know, like they know the specs, they know what they need, but it just gives some context. And it's the same principle, you know. But if I went to them and said, and drew them an exact copy schematic diagram of how the engine works and gave it to them and said, like, this is why it's going to pull your machine, a lot of them be like, okay, that's cool. It doesn't really faze me how it works as long as it can pull that implement across the paddock.
Seeing is believing. Yeah,
exactly. So turn back the clock, Chris, for a second. Obviously, you know, you've got a wealth of experience here. You know, what would you have done differently? You know, knowing what you know now, knowing what you know about visual thinking, what would you have done differently? And where do you think you would have been? You know, by maybe implementing this stuff earlier.
Oh, there was definitely a number of businesses that I was involved in early on that, you know, failed spectacularly. That, you know, there was a business in 2009 I was involved with, and it was a digital startup, and the directors just weren't on the same page. They didn't understand IT, and so I was constantly standing in a boardroom environment trying to explain things that they just didn't get. They couldn't see it. They didn't understand it. Their expertise wasn't there. I was the subject matter expert talking to non-subject matter decision makers. And so there was a lot of this blah, 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 and I'd leave the meeting room and I'd just be scratching my head because I wholeheartedly believed that I knew what needed to be done, but I didn't get the authority because they didn't understand. They were the primary investors. And I should have put my foot down in hindsight because I did believe in it, but I could have explained the problem with the business model a hell of a lot better to those investors so they could actually see what it is I was worried about. And sure enough, 12 months later, the business was gone and about 300K in funding was gone too. So that's definitely something that resonates, that I could have explained and communicated and showed them the problems that I was seeing. And sure enough, a year later, exactly what I thought was wrong eventuated. So they're definitely a missed opportunity there.
And and look, we all have, you know, I have similar, you know, thoughts about it as well. It's like, this is why I love doing these Frothy Fridays, because I get to meet people that have different ideas and different concepts. And it's like, well, actually 99% of all concepts can be tied back to some, you know, most businesses could benefit from it. And I always like to reiterate that, okay, yeah, this may not jam with you as a automotive mechanic, but like someone that's just starting them auto mechanics business, you know, 2 doors down from you, and they're doing things like this and they're being proactive about how they do their business. And it may not just be this back of the napkin. It might be like, you know, implementing like startup methodologies to the way they do it, or, you know, doing better customer service because they've got a CRM system that's helping them document their customer experience better. There's a whole bunch of people that are moving into the market that are digital natives that have come across this stuff already. If you're not keeping up with them, in 10 years, you're going to look around and go, where did all my business go? And it's all going across the road. And then in 20 years' time, if he's not here, he's got the same problem. So it's like, don't just think because it's good now, it's not worth learning, at least exploring different concepts and see how they apply. And, you know, it's not a square peg into a round hole. Because yeah, look, you may explore this and go, yeah, actually it's not my jam, but there's definitely other ways to break down complex topics into simpler forms that teams can use. And I think if any business owners take that away, is that like you said, it's a jam. You know, like there's proactive businesses and there's reactive businesses. There's no in between. You're one or the other, and you swing between the two. Like there's days where I'm just like completely reactive because it's the situation I'm in is too much business, and I'm like, oh well, you know, putting out spot fires. But there's also swings where you could be proactive, but you're just staying reactive because it's what you're comfortable doing. But there's a whole bunch of hungry young, you know, not young, old, new business owners out there that are willing to take your
mature.
Mature, yeah, yeah. Crawl across the glass to take your business, and
Yeah.
if you unless you have the same kind of drive, eventually they'll just take it, and it's and that's just the nature of free market, I suppose.
Absolutely, adapt or die. You're standing still, you're going backwards today. Things are moving so fast. So you're a project manager in business or whatever you do. So you've got to communicate, you've got to problem solve. And whether it's this or whether it's some other framework that you love that helps you communicate better, how can that be anything but a bloody good thing?
Exactly. And I'm sure like you would probably be able to answer this. I'm sure because back in the napkin, that was written along quite a while ago, wasn't it?
2008, correct.
Yeah, and but that book's I'm sure that the concepts have been adapted and evolved over time,
Absolutely.
to evolve for the market.
It is the foundation though. So Dan Rome, the author of Back of the Napkin from San Francisco, he's been doing this for about 30 years. I've got the Australian license. I'm the principal for Australia, but a few people in industry specific things under me. It has evolved and it's got some amazing, like again, talk about the apprenticeship all the way through to your masters or whatever. And he's got some amazing stuff that's just the kung fu of thinking and problem solving. But this is the foundation. There's a tool in this book called the 6x6, which is I've touched on some of it here. It's really just getting your feet wet and understanding, okay, what's this framework all about? Do I get it? And, I'm sure most people will. You might not. There's a lot of other stuff out there, business model canvas, all the way through, IDEO have got some great stuff in design thinking. You've got Steve Blank and a whole heap of guys that have come out of the woodwork in the last 10, 20 years and doing some really cool stuff and changing the way business is taught in university because, I dropped out of uni as well. It was absolutely crap. They were teaching us stuff I asked the senior lecturer what was the lag time between the module that he was teaching us that day and real world application. He told me 15 years. I dropped out the next day. I said, F this. What am I wasting my time for?
Yeah, and it is evolve and die, and just the movement of information is so fast now. Like that's the thing with the traditional MBA. Because when I worked at Boakman's, I was running a dealership, like a branch of a dealership. We turned over $30 million just in our branch, and I sort of said to these boys, I was like, like realistically, the person that should have my role should have an MBA because I had 20 staff, and it was like, I was managing quite a significant portion of their business. And I said to him, I said, should I go and do that just in case in the future I'll, another role like in another bit? He goes, no, you learn almost all of it by just doing it and asking a lot of questions. And I was like, sweet, okay. So, 2 years later, I was kicking ass, and I look back and go, that MBA may probably, and not taking anything away from it, but it probably would have just reinforced what I was doing anyway, and I would have learnt 99% of it on the job, same way you do an apprenticeship. It's really just there to make sure you have the minimum standard. But any Fortune 500 CEO, they did their MBA 35 years ago and like don't apply a single principle from it because they've got people that do it or whatever.
Exactly. Spot on.
So yeah, okay. So just before we sort of touch base and sort of go towards the back end of the show, so let's say, for instance, because what something I was thinking about as we were talking is that I think a lot of business owners, I wouldn't like if I'm going to go back and actually start to do a bit more diligence on this because I did read part of the book about 4 years ago, and then I just I get distracted pretty easily as you're doing when you're doing a whole bunch of stuff. But I wouldn't, would you recommend a business just wholeheartedly jump in both feet, or I think it would almost be a better transition for businesses if they did something that wasn't maybe even business related. They did like if they got a landscaping project they're doing in the backyard, or something like that, like something that's not going to cost, like it has doesn't have a tangible effect to the business yet. But let's say they're doing a reno, to tackle a reno first and break that down. And then once they understand the principles, because they've had something to practice on, then start to take little chunks out of the business.
Absolutely. My first piece of advice there is pick your problem. And my advice around that is pick a problem that is out of sight but not out of reach. So you don't want to pick a problem. I don't have enough money to complete the job tomorrow. Well, that's a showstopper, or
Yes.
you've either got to minimize your work or get more money. You've either got to do less work or get another, trade assistant or whatever. Like, that's a pretty simple. Pick something that's just a little bit more complicated than that. Something that when you first think about it, you might jot a few different ideas that are different problems that are giving you a headache at the moment. But something that is a medium problem, all right? Something that's not so ridiculous that you need, and when you've got that problem, it could be you're doing a reno and there's a roadblock. There's a massive roadblock, structural integrity, supplier combination. So, and then go back to what we were talking about before, breaking that down, the who or the what. How can you draw a business icon around the who or the what of that problem? Well, the who or the what might be the client. The what might be the problem. The what might be you don't have the skill set, or it could be, it's either a person, it's either an object, or it's a concept. So start fleshing that down. Just basic stick figures, that might have a dollar. Basic stick figures that might have this could be the finance person, and they're giving you a hard time. They might be talking to the customer a whole lot of, blah, 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 and confusion. And the customer's over here just very upset. And that's a really very, very basic example of how to start thinking about that. Once you've got that who or the what laid out, you might then move on to, well, how much is this problem worth to us? Like, what are the numbers that we know about this? And what's the timeline that we're working on? This could be time, and this could be dollars, obviously. So where are we at? Where's the cutoff point as well? We might be doing a project. This is what I can afford to do. Once the project is north of this part here, it must be a no. Anything over this, we're gonna deem a no for the business. It's a no go. So the what. Then we want to work out the where. Where does this fit into the business values? There could be, and this is my favorite, the Venn diagram. How do these things work together? This might be our business values, our brand, and the risks that we're prepared to take on. How much money have we got to be able to outlay the type of projects that fit? And that sweet spot here is where we want to start having a conversation about. This is where we want the conversation to go, because that's the business sweet spot. And then where, what sort of timelines are we talking about? And you start fleshing these things out on a piece of paper. This might be 2020, which for most of us sucked. Yes. 2021. What's going to be different about 2021? With information that we've got here about what work we want to do, because we want to make a certain amount of money. We want to work in a certain area with certain type of people. And then you start mapping answers on your problem. I guarantee you the worst thing that can happen is you're going to clarify your problem a hell of a lot better. And that's the number one step of any problem solving process is the first thing is to define your problem properly, because unless you can define problem effectively, you've got no chance at coming up with an appropriate solution.
So good. Yeah, I can, even just a simple thing like the Venn diagram with, it might be, you might be looking at contractors to do a certain part of a project, and you got like your values, you've got your brand, and you got the amount you're willing to spend, and you can just like plot them out where they sit in that and go, okay, well, these two companies align closest, to the center. Let's talk to them first. Whereas if you look at them all on paper with statistics, it's like, okay, well, actually, it's hard to compare them. But when you see them all aligned with what you visually accept as the sweet spot, then it makes it a little bit easier to pick those people to talk to. Same with staff. You could do the same thing if you're employing people. It's like, okay, well, these are our values. this is, and then go, well, these three staff are the closest to the market. Let's start with them and work back or something, There's so many ways. That's the good thing about it. It's like, it's almost like a language. And once you know the language, like you were saying, and like the book teaches you the language, once you know the language of visual thinking, then really it's just the application is completely, and how you do it is completely up to you.
Look, one of my favorite quotes about strategy, and there's a million of them, but I try to keep things fairly simple in my world. But one of my favorite is strategy is actually more about what you say no to. And we all as business owners and entrepreneurs or whatever, we're all attracted to the shiny thing, and we think that's going to make more money. And yes, I'm going to take on all those jobs. But if you start jotting down those values, those brands, those risks, and you go, okay, what are we and what are we not? And so you start automatically, you don't even have to stress, do I need to take this job? Because you already know, yes, you've got to take jobs on for cash flow. I'm not saying, anything along those lines. Sometimes we need to make sure, with golden rules, make sure the cash flow stays north of the spending. That's 101. But once you're, at that next inch, at that next level as a business and you're established, you can start making decisions about how to cull clients, how to cull jobs that are just not in line with your brand, your strategy, and what risks you're prepared to take on.
100%, man, 100%. Well, all right. So what's been happening in the visual thinking labs? What's going on? Have you got any courses or anything happening at the moment that we can tell everyone about?
Yeah, look, we're gearing up really well. We actually had our first Australian workshop where I was flying some guest speakers over from Singapore and the States. We had that scheduled for 29th of April this year, and then about a month beforehand that geared down pretty quickly, particularly in Melbourne. So we've been just pivoting the whole business to go online. I really wanted something that wasn't just another bloody webinar, another Zoom, training process out there, another training program. So for us, we've spent time breaking that down into bite-sized chunks, much more digestible. We've all got Zoom fatigue these days because, I don't know about you, but I'm on Zoom for about 4 or 5 hours a day. And so creating a bit of a community online was really important for us, and creating groups of people that could learn together was also really important. I didn't want, the apprentice in with the fourth year. I didn't want wanted to make sure that there was a learning curve that was fit for everybody. We've got some foundation workshops that we're running. I'd encourage anybody that's interested to come along. You're more than welcome to shoot me a text. I've got 8 places, I think, left for our next one next month. So if anyone wants to take advantage of that, you're more than welcome to. And that's a 1 hour session where we just deep dive into a lot more what we've gone through here today.
So okay. So how can people reach you? Obviously, we'll post a link after this, with some of the details of these foundation courses. Because look, I think I might be joining. I think it's important to just have a, and look, I'm not a business veteran by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's important to have a good understanding of a whole bunch of topics. Just be eclectic in your learning. And this is just one of these things. You just got to learn, even if it's just piques your interest slightly, going and just having a basic understanding of it allows you to help other people. You might have mates that are struggling and you're like, well, actually look at this book, talk to Chris, this could work for you. So yeah, I think it's important to have a cursory understanding of this kind of thing. So these are the details. So we got 0407 188 934. This is Chris's number, I assume.
Yeah, just text me through your name and my online guy, and I'll know that you've come through this channel. Believe I was told this morning there was 8 spots left for the next one. They can go pretty quick. Otherwise, if you just want to have a look around, visualthinking.training. Otherwise, the master, Dan Rome in the States, he's all over the internet. One of those three things will get you all the information you need. And if you just want to chat, feel free to call that mobile. We could probably organise a conversation about your particular needs or whatever works.
It's amazing, and it's like, yeah, I'm looking at this and looking at the way we're doing it. You know, like the way we've done it wouldn't have been technically feasible 5 years ago. Technology is moving so fast, and sometimes, you know, with all the project management tools and all the stuff, sometimes just pen and paper it's got its place, and you're never gonna get rid of pen and paper. Like, that's probably what I'm getting at. And you know, even this, like visually seeing the number and the details, it has such a more of an effect than just typing it into a chat box and sending it. So guys, yeah, do yourself a favor. Look, if it's piqued your interest at all, you know, like I said, you know, check to Chris, go on YouTube. You know, there's heaps of primer and starter videos, and you know, there's one thing I've really gathered from doing these screencasts is that everyone's willing to help if you're just willing to ask the question. And, you know, as a business, it can get pretty, especially now with COVID and, you know, all the uncertainty around, it's like it can get pretty tough to carry a lot of this load. But like sometimes, you know, you just need some, like, you know, you just someone to bounce an idea off. You know, I'm sure if you called Chris up and said, look, I'm a mechanic, automotive shop, and I'm struggling to get the staff to, you know, it's like sometimes just having a conversation about it doesn't even have to be in nuts and bolts, just a philosophical conversation can help. So, you know, don't be afraid to call guys like Chris, you know, call me and I'll pass you on to Chris, but I'm happy to help as well. And that's the biggest thing I've gotten out of doing these screencasts. So I think I've done almost 20 now, is every person I've spoken to is just genuinely happy to help, you know, and just help, you know, businesses and help the community sort of, you know, because we're all in the same boat effectively. So very good. All right. I think that's it. I think the chat system's not working. I had a couple of questions, but they've disappeared now. So if they do come, I'll just message you and I'll get you an answer if you've written a question when I go and check back a few of these channels. But honestly, thanks very much, Chris. I got heaps out of this. You know, and that's why I love this so much, is if I'm getting insights and stuff out of this, and other people are as well. So, you know, thanks for taking the time to give us a bit of a primer on how visual thinking works. And like I said, if you want to get in touch with Chris, there's his mobile. You know, if you give him a call, send him a message or whatever. And yeah, no doubt you'll probably see me in your fundamentals course, because I'm pretty interested. So, all right, thanks very much, guys. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will catch you all next week.